Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can achieve some depth and distance in your landscape paintings, and it's by using aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective, if you like. It's essentially the same thing, and I don't like to overcomplicate things. I'll keep it relatively simple, and it's a simple matter really of having your cooler, lighter tones in the distance and then your darker, warmer tones in the foreground or closer to you really, and then kind of blend the two together. So I'm going to paint a landscape marsh type scene, and I'll start with the sky and larger shapes towards the top, and keeping the sort of darkest blues at the top as well, and then have them gradually getting lighter as they come down towards the horizon. And so even at this early stage, thinking about perspective and then bringing those lines down sort of almost vertical to start with, and then they level off as they get down towards the horizon. And then once we get down to the horizon, you'll see they become almost horizontal. So I'm just using a mixture of ultramarine and cobalt blue. And now just bring that across, and you can see getting basically horizontal. Now I'll add a touch of warmth into the sky with some raw sienna. And again, kind of slightly darker tones towards the top, and then getting gradually lighter as we come down towards the horizon, and allowing that to touch the blue in places as well so it mixes together. And then again, almost horizontal as we come down to the horizon. I'll just put a touch of alizarin into that just for a little bit more warmth. And then I'm just going to pick up some of the grey that's there, and then just add some dark kind of shadows into the clouds. And exactly the same as before, darker towards the top, and then getting gradually lighter as we come down. And again, allowing all the paint to mix together on the page. I think it's quite important when if you're using this technique is to work quickly before everything dries out, so you get a nice kind of soft finish. And leaving a few areas of white of the paper shining through as well. That should give it like quite a nice glow. And once again, kind of horizontal as we get to the horizon. And I'll just take some clean water and then just soften that edge. I think even at this early stage you can see the clouds kind of move off into the distance there. So I'm just going to add some land now, and I've grabbed some raw sienna and just mix that in with what's on the palette, and I'm going to paint kind of like a marsh area, so leaving some areas behind unpainted just for some wet puddles or little streams running through. It's pretty much the same principle as with the sky, so leaving larger areas unpainted towards the foreground, and then as we move away, making those light areas slightly smaller, and just doing that gradually, so that should give a sort of impression really that it's receding away. And also sort of warmer tones in the foreground, and they're getting increasingly cool the further away we get. So I just picked up a bit more cobalt blue now, and obviously being a cooler tone, it should help with the recession. But all the time allowing the paint to touch and mix together. I'm just going to switch to a smaller brush. It's a size 4 sable, and I just picked up even more blue. And now still leaving some sort of small unpainted areas, and getting increasingly smaller the further away we get. And I think already you can see it's starting to create the illusion of perspective and a sense of distance. So I'll pick up even more blue, and as I bring this wash up towards the sky wash, it's going to start touching in places and softening. And again, where the paint touches the water of the sky wash, but it kind of softens on its own, and that also gives quite a nice sense of distance, with the sky kind of almost running down into the land. I always think that the softer your horizon line is, the further away it kind of appears to be. And I think obviously because we're working in a two-dimensional space, that being a sheet of paper, everything we do really is just trying to create an illusion. And so even if you're painting plein air out there looking at the distance, it may not appear blue, or maybe even lighter to the naked eye. But if you employ these techniques and just think, make that distance bluer and cooler, it creates the illusion of that distance on the two-dimensional sheet of paper. So now I'm right up to the horizon line, and I'll just add maybe like an impression that there's a few kind of distant trees, and then just bring some of that colour down into the land so it blends together. And just put a few trees in, very little more than just a few kind of dots. And where they're touching that sky wash, they're just softening off. I'll just grab a touch of alizarin crimson and some raw sienna. In just a few places, just maybe outline a few kind of shrubs and grassy areas. And then grab some of that dark that's there in the palette and just put that in kind of here and there. And because the paper's still wet, a lot of that will just soften off and diffuse. And just mix up kind of like a dirty green. There's some raw sienna and some cobalt. And same again, it's just some texture, some grass. And making these shapes slightly larger, slightly darker, the closer we get. And then just kind of grab a little bit of everything that's in that well there. And getting darker still as we come into the foreground. And just using a few kind of vertical strokes. And that should just suggest that there's some longer grasses. Now all the time, not really thinking about shapes of anything, just concentrating on the aerial perspective. So like I said before, cooler in the distance and then darker and warmer in the foreground. Then by adding these darks in the foreground, that helps to push the distance back. Just using the side of the brush, just adding a touch of dry brush texture. Okay, that's the first wash done, so just allow that to dry. Okay, I think for scale, I'm just going to add a boat there, just on the marsh. That'll help kind of tie the sky down into the land area. So I'll just grab some of the paint that's left behind on the palette. And I'm just using a size 2 sable brush. And then just put in the rough shape of a boat. Just bring the brush over in one go, really. And then I'll just add a mask to that. And just a straight line, bring that straight up. Very simple boat. And there's a few kind of wet areas on the marsh there, so I'll reflect that boat down into some of that. Just very simply, don't want to overstate it. and just soften that off with my finger. Now I'm going to put a few birds in the sky as well. It's another little trick to help with perspective. And so I'll put a bird in there quite high up, just very simply. But a nice little trick if you're putting in birds and you want to make it look like they're going off into the distance is to have your highest bird the darkest and the most stated, I suppose, and then as you come down just make them just a little bit smaller and a little bit fainter. And I'll put one more in, a little bit lower, so again just a bit smaller and a tiny little bit fainter, and that helps just create the illusion that they're going off into the distance. And I'll just add a few more, kind of just a few dark areas down right in the foreground there. Again, just help to push everything back a little bit further. Don't want to do too much of that. Just a few simple kind of vertical or diagonal strokes. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. That's the finished painting. Well, that's a nice simple little demo there, just giving you a few sort of tricks and techniques you can use just to get a bit of distance into your paintings. So just to recap, but keep it very simple really, but just think of lighter, bluer tones, cooler tones in the distance, and then darker, warmer tones in the mid and foreground, saving your darks really for the foreground. And it's the same kind of idea for the sky, so up towards the top, slightly darker and warmer than it is off at the horizon. Well, I hope you liked that video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know down in the comments if you've got any ideas or anything that you'd like me to cover in another video. And you can follow me over on Patreon, where I have exclusive videos for my members only, and you can also follow me on YouTube now, where I have a members only section similar to Patreon. Well, I'll be back again next week for another video, so until then, happy painting, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.